Imagine a world cloaked in shadows, where the air is thick with fear and uncertainty. The stench of death lingers in the alleys, and whispers of despair travel faster than the wind. You can hear the distant cries of a populace gripped by panic, their nights haunted by visions of a relentless foe that strikes without warning. Tonight we are looking at a story of an unseen enemy that emerged from the depths of filth and neglect, a story that begins in the bustling streets of medieval Europe, at a time when society was on the brink of collapse. In the early 14th century, a perfect storm of climatic shifts, social turmoil, and unsanitary living conditions laid the groundwork for an unprecedented catastrophe. As the world teetered on the edge of disaster, a tiny creature, overlooked and forgotten, would spark a chain of events that would rewrite the course of human history forever. With the backdrop of a deepening famine, enormous economic pressures, and societies struggling against it, the whims of fate, the stage was set for a calamity of epic proportions. The Black Plague would not just claim lives, it would shatter the foundations of communities, challenge the very fabric of faith, and redefine the meaning of survival amidst hopelessness. As we delve deeper into this dark chapter, we will unearth the mystery of how this vile scourge arrived, borne by the very fleas that feasted on the blood of infected rats. Join us as we traverse the grim landscape of fear, resilience, and tragedy that enveloped 14th century Europe, ultimately leading us to confront the haunting legacy of what came to be known as one of history's most devastating pandemics. This is the tale of the fleas that spurred a pandemic. Chapter 1. A World Unprepared. In the echoing silence of history, long before the chill of the Black Death swept across Europe, a different kind of quiet settled into the hearts of its people. The year is 1300. Europe is a tapestry of feudal relationships, as patchworked as the land itself, a collection of lords, vassals, and serfs, bound by an invisible web of loyalty and desperation. The cities brim with life, but beneath the vibrant facade lies a decaying foundation, where the whispers of discontent taint the air. This is a world teetering on the brink of transformation. Urban centres are swelling, drawing in peasants from the countryside, their hopes glistening like the morning dew. They flee the relentless grip of feudal lords, seeking opportunities in bustling marketplaces and burgeoning trades. But these cities are anything but prepared for the onslaught of humanity. With their rapid expansion comes a perilous neglect of basic hygiene and public health. Streets, once glistening with the anticipation of trade, now fester under the grit of everyday life. Waste, human and animal alike, clogs the cobblestones, and the stench of decay hangs heavy in the air. Even the grandest of marketplaces, filled with the vibrant colours and sounds of late medieval commerce, is a breeding ground for filth. The populace, blinded by the allure of prosperity, turns a blind eye to the squalor that dwells at the heart of their existence. The conditions are ripe for a unique, unseen menace. The small, nimble flea, the unwitting carrier of death, thrives amid these unsanitary conditions, nesting within the fur of rats that scuttle through the alleys and garbage piles, remnants of a society that has traded hygiene for bounty. The once loyal servants of agriculture, these rats, long ignored and shunned, become agents of despair, silently harboring the bacterium Yersinia pestis in their very being. As urban centres stretch their sinewy fingers across the landscapes of Europe, discontent brews within the lower echelons of society. The newly minted middle class rises within the shadow of aristocracy, but with their ascension comes an unresolved tension, a palpable fear of collective weakness. The once cherished bonds of loyalty fray, opening fissures into resentment and uncertainty. People whisper of betrayals, and the fabric holding society together begins to fray. The result is a powerful sense of isolation amid the surrounding tumult. Much of this is juxtaposed against the backdrop of a series of famine years, which has left the populace exhausted and more desperate than ever to grasp at the safety promises of urban life. The struggle to survive is partitioned by both natural and human-made calamities, and every day becomes a task of survival amid a crumbling world. Grains yield poorly, harvests fail, and with each season, the toll of starvation creeps closer. There is no respite, only a gnawing anxiety that burrows deep into the bones of men and women alike. Yet in all this turmoil, a cloud of uncertainty looms over Europe, not born solely from the hardships of labor, but from an unseen presence that grows stronger as the villagers work harder. The atmosphere itself shifts, laden with an unseen poison, of market stalls, and in the furrowed of market stalls, and in the furrowed brows of mothers yearning for a life untouched by despair. Meanwhile, the ruling classes sit high above, ensconced in their castles and fortified places, engrossed in their elaborate games of power and politics. The wealthy protect their estates, while the common people are left to fend for themselves in a world that exudes predation from both land and sky. The nobles appear indifferent, focusing their gaze on the horizon, calculating alliances with neighboring lords, while the spectre of illness gnaws mercilessly at the very fabric of their society. As the seasons pass, the sun casts its watchful gaze over the European landscape, a gilded mask hiding the insidious rot below. In the winter of 1347, darkness overtakes the land. The first chestnut trees shudder under the weight of an shilu, undetectable vector of illness, hitching rides on the backs of rats and through clusters of poorly managed homes. It is only a whisper at first, a testament to the fragility of existence when placed beside the vastness of nature's design. If people had dared to look, truly look, they might have seen the telltale signs: animals living on the brink of unhealthy conditions, the squalor in public spaces, and the shadows of the cities where disease waits patiently, hungry. But it is easy to turn a blind eye to such things when survival demands it. People's faith in their power over life and death. It shields them as much as it blinds. As February arrives with its chilling winds, the very air begins to thrum with an energy both foreign and familiar. When the first reports come trickling in, the inexplicable fevers, the swellings, the agonizing pains, they are brushed aside as isolated occurrences, local misfortune. Health practitioners, with their rudimentary understanding of ailments, resort to superstition, fire, and folk remedies, attempting to fend off the cold fingers of death that weave through the streets of their cities. The populace feels the impending weight of impending doom, their eyes round with growing awareness. Unseen forces wreak havoc among the population. Murmurs spread like wildfire, igniting hysteria, rooting deeper fears into the citizens of each town. The spectre of death, the ramifications of Yersinia pestis, draws nearer, promising a reckoning none can escape. These moments are crucial in the unfolding of a dark history, a history that will engulf a continent, forever altering the course of human civilization. As the cities brace themselves for an arrival they cannot comprehend, they edge ever closer to a darkness that will consume their lives, changing the way humanity sees health, disease, and mortality. Before we descend further into the dark, make sure you are subscribed to the channel. You won't want to face the rest of this journey alone. And before we continue, drop a comment and tell me where in the world you are watching from tonight. Knowing you are out there, somewhere in the dark, makes this history feel all the more alive. Chapter 2. Rats, the unseen enemy. In the shadows of our history lies an unseen adversary, a creature often dismissed as a mere nuisance, yet capable of rewriting the very fabric of human existence. The black rat, a seemingly innocuous inhabitant of cities and towns, emerges as a pivotal player in a relentless tragedy, one that unfurls in an age overwhelmed by barbarism and fragility. As we dive deeper into the heart of the 14th century, we unravel the intricate web that binds these creatures to the most catastrophic pandemic the world has ever known, the Black Death. Picture Europe in the early 1300s. Verdant fields stretch across the landscape, living under the touch of a growing civilization that has learned to harness nature to its advantage. The towns begin to burgeon, filled with merchants, craftsmen, and farmers. Here, the black rat finds its playground, scuttling through the alleys and crevices of burgeoning cities. Thriving on agricultural abundance and the burgeoning waste of human habitation, these rodents adapt seamlessly to their newfound environment. Their dark fur, an emblem of resilience, allows them to lurk in the shadows, unseen yet ever present. As rats flourish, so too do their close companions, the fleas. Tiny jet-black parasites, these creatures hitch rides on the fur of their rodent hosts, breeding in the very places where humanity thrives. They are small but deadly, among the most lethal of nature's infantry. When the black rat draws close to human settlements, it brings with it a hidden arsenal of plague-infested fleas, stealthily carrying one of history's most notorious pathogens. In bustling markets and crowded narrow lanes, the fabric of daily life remains unchanged, blissfully unaware of the ghost lurking. In the corners, an invisible storm brewing beneath the surface. But how did humanity come to inhabit a world so inextricably linked with these silent invaders? To understand this, we must listen to the echoes of voices from the past, to those who catalogued the first signs of disease, and who tread the precipice of horror long before it could be named. Pest control experts draw upon their knowledge, revealing an unsettling truth about the adaptability of rats. Rats are opportunists, one expert states, a knowing glint in their eyes. They capitalize on human error and waste. Wherever humans settle and thrive, so too do they. The intimacy of this relationship is alarming, yet compelling. As civilizations expand, the crumbling walls of sanitation and care breed the perfect environment for these scavengers. They weave themselves into the very fabric of society, oftentimes living in closer quarters with humans than other animals. In the grain stores of towns, in the straw-strewn floors of barns, the black rat finds its buffet. They feast on what we waste, and as they consume, they breed, and they breed rapidly. A pair of black rats can produce dozens of offspring each year, creating a cycle that spirals out of control. As we delve deeper, we see cities teeming not just with human life, but with a thriving population of rats, their numbers swelling as they adapt alongside human expansion. But let's take a moment to immerse ourselves in the context of health and hygiene, or the stark lack thereof, in medieval Europe. The understanding of disease transmission is still in its infancy. Miasma theory reigns supreme, positing that foul air could cause illness. With no comprehension of the relationship between fleas, rats, and humans, townspeople go about their lives in ignorance, blissfully unaware of the time bomb ticking away in their very homes. Rather than being treated as the threats they are, rats slip deeper into domesticity, adopted as crop protectors and even as companions. The camera shifts to scenes of everyday life, people going about their work, children playing in the dirt, market stalls filled with goods. Yet outside the view of the lens, a sinister symmetry unfolds. In rodent burrows, fleas reproduce at a frantic pace, laying the groundwork for calamity. Their ancestors thrived under the cover of humanity, and now they prepare to unleash chaos. As winter blankets Europe, the rats grow bolder, venturing closer to human warmth. In the coops and granaries, food runs low, and desperation claws at the bellies of humans and rats alike. The fleas take to their function with chilling efficiency, burrowing into the warm fur of their hosts. They carry the bacterium Yersinia pestis, cryptic and indomitable, a silent assassin waiting for the right moment to unleash its terror. Then comes the catalyst, unseen yet inevitable. In the bustling ports, a dark harbinger arrives, ships laden with cargo from distant lands. As sailors disembark, they bring with them not only goods, but also the very lice of the sea, an unclaimed infestation nestled among wood and cloth, unwittingly ferrying with them the parasites that understand no borders. Among them are the very black rats that find their filth at home in the holds of ships, their vectors of infection expanding drastically with each passing day. The narrative accelerates. We can now see it building momentum like a gathering storm. Unbeknownst to those living in the coastal towns, one ill-fated ship has docked, ushering in the unwelcome guests hiding in the shadows. It takes mere weeks for the unspeakable to begin. Reports emerge, strange illnesses, sudden deaths. Fever and confusion sweep through the ranks of the populace as victims fall. The shadowy antagonists, the black rats and their faithful fleas, dance unnoticed on the peripheries, their maladies infecting a population that has become too cozy in its ignorance. As the waves of sickness begin to mount, one cannot help but notice the pattern. Each district, each home, each death connected by an invisible thread. Interviews with historians reveal the relentless spread of the plague, likening it to wildfire racing through dry grass. With technological advancements, we often fail to see how nature's tantrum becomes our undoing, notes one expert gravely. Rats have learned to cohabitate, to adapt in ways that often work to their advantage. When they come into close contact with people, they bring forth chaos. While countless lives are lost, society struggles to confront the reality. A chilling dissonance fills the air, a desire to dismiss the fatalities as misfortunes of misfortune, instead of recognizing the darkness looming just out of sight. People begin to turn to folklore and superstition, seeking any scapegoat to blame. When the rats slink away into the shadows, communities briefly rejoice, oblivious to the fact that the disease still lingers, carried by the very fleas that have become a nightmare etched in their souls. Experts remind us that this chaos was not merely due to the physical presence of the rats, but rather how they exploited the very dynamics of human existence, a fraying tapestry woven of fear, desperation, and distrust, each piece falling, one after the other, until the whole structure crumbles. In examining the rats, we face a mirror, a reflection of ourselves wrapped in history's embrace. Yet, as we chronicle these events, we witness a truth that runs deeper, the frailty of the human experience, the unintended consequences of coexistence with nature's most resilient inhabitants. The black rats, symbols of survival, become agents of doom, and the plague they carry, a bitter reminder of humanity's vulnerability amidst a web of ecological relationships that is as intricate as it is lethal. As we stand at this junction of fate, the reality becomes stark. The rats are not merely pests, they are messengers of an unseen enemy. Casting their shadows over our past, they remind us of the delicate balance we tread. And while the years march on, the lessons of the black rat linger, waiting to be unearthed in the pages of history, whispering secrets of resilience, adaptation, and the ever-looming threat of the unseen enemy. Thus, we return to the present once more, mindful of the histories buried beneath our feet, forever shaped by the presence of those we cannot see. Chapter 3. Fleas, Tiny Terrorists. In the shadows of history, the smallest of creatures often leave the most indelible marks on humanity's journey. The world may remember great plagues and sweeping pandemics, yet the true architects of these calamities often elude our gaze. They are not the grand beasts of folk tales or the monstrous figures of fables. Rather, they are the minuscule and overlooked fleas. These inconspicuous parasites emerge as the true villains in a terrifying saga that unravels in the heart of medieval life. The life cycle of the flea is a masterclass in survival, an intricate dance of adaptation and reproduction that transforms humble beginnings into harbingers of death. Fleas, particularly the infamous Xenopsilla chiopis, thrive in environments imbued with filth and decay. Their story begins not in isolation, but amidst a congregation of larger beings, rats, the unsuspecting hosts of a deadly bacterial entity known as Yersinia pestis. As we peer into the dim and dusty alleys of the 14th century, we find ourselves shrouded in darkness, with streets replete with refuse, a perfect breeding ground for fleas. The air is thick with the stench of waste, a pungent reminder of the grimy existence of its human inhabitants. The rats scuttle across cobblestones, their bodies brimming with the very fleas that are vital to the progression of one of history's deadliest pandemics. A flea begins its life as an egg, tiny and oval, each barely visible to the naked eye. A female flea can lay up to 50 eggs in a single day, scattering them in the fur of their hosts or the crevices of their habitats. They gravitate towards the moist and warm corners of the rat's fur, where the presence of warmth and the vibrance of life provide a perfect environment for the burgeoning pest population. We witness animations showing the eggs hatching into larvae, small and pale, wriggling in their search for nourishment. These larvae emerge into a world of peril, descending into the detritus of dead skin and organic decay. Feasting upon this nutrient-rich debris, they undergo a transformation, one shaped by survival. After days of feeding, they weave silky cocoons in the shadowy corners of their world, emerging later as adult fleas, hungry and poised for their next meal. This metamorphosis is not merely biological. It mirrors a landscape of danger and desperation. The rat, a creature often misunderstood, becomes a symbol of both life and death. It is in the hairy folds of this rodent's coat that the flea finds its place. The symbiosis between rats and fleas is one of necessity. The rats provide an endless supply of nourishment, while the fleas spread invasive life throughout their environment. As adult fleas emerge from their cocoon, their survival hinges on their capacity to find a host. They possess an acute sense of vibration and carbon dioxide, magnifying an innate ability to find their way to fresh hosts. The animations illuminate their leaping prowess, a remarkable adaptation that enables them to spring several inches into the air. Here, they can grasp onto passing rats, latching onto them and penetrating their skin with tiny mouths designed for sucking blood. It's this act of feeding that carries with it a darker purpose. With each bite, the flea transmits bacteria that have lived symbiotically within its own body. This is no ordinary bacterium. Yersinia pestis, a cunning and devastating microbe, lies dormant in the flea's gut, awaiting its chance to wreak havoc. As the flea attempts to satiate its hunger, it unknowingly spits a cocktail of infectious matter back into its host, establishing a macabre link between the two. Rats, so numerous and often thought of as mere pests, become conduits of death, their bodies becoming vessels for disease as they traverse through towns and cities. The once thriving populations of rodents form a ticking time bomb within the societal framework, a prelude to chaos beneath the surface of human normalcy. As the narrative unfolds, we examine the lives of the people who inhabit this tumultuous world, those who, blissfully unaware of the tiny terrorists lurking in the shadows, go about their lives. Merchants, peasants, nobles, all live intertwined with the rats that scurry through the alleyways. Their lives are punctuated by trade and community, laughter and longing, ignorance and unknowing dread. Yet, even in the heart of this ordinary existence, an insidious shift begins to take place. Fleas, through the magnificent tool of their life cycle, propagate not only within rats, but also jump onto the human populace, piercing the skin, feeding on blood. It is here that the true horror begins, the visceral connection between a simple flea bite and the onset of a horrific pandemic. As the flea jumps from host to host, it ushers in an era defined by suffering and death. Visuals depict the slow, creeping presence of illness, the first signs manifesting in the form of fever, chills, and agonizing discomfort. The infected succumb to the invisible force that takes hold within them. The bacteria spreads rapidly through their systems, overwhelming their bodies. Fleas serve as the twisted hand guiding the unseen torment, as Yersinia pestis works its grotesque magic within its human hosts. A silent hysteria spreads, much like the plague itself, inching ever closer to a crisis point. Rumors grow among the people, whispers of a new sickness take hold. In places where once laughter echoed, silence descends, a harbinger of despair. The animation shows once bustling marketplaces, now desolate and barren, their stalls abandoned, the cries of vendors replaced by a haunting void. The very fabric of society begins to unravel. With each passing day, more die, others fall into despair, unable to grasp the source of their affliction. The narrative takes on a rhythm of panic, reflecting the chaos that reigns as symptoms worsen and death tolls rise. As fear grips the populace, town guards close off neighborhoods, sealing them in an effort to contain the wrath of the unseen foe. Pockets of abandonment appear, where those judged to be infected are cast away. Young and old alike suffer, each marked by the blackened skin of infection, a visible reminder of, as the spectre of extinction. In this morbid tale, historical records become our guiding light. We reveal the writings of chroniclers and witnesses, capturing the growing dread as the Great Plague takes hold of Europe. Their words blend into a tapestry of horror, entries filled with anguish and despair, chronicling the horror that unfolds. Death, carts wheel through towns, filled with the lifeless bodies of those claimed by the crisis. The earth becomes a mass grave, marked only by hastily dug pits under a cover of darkness, memorials to lives lost. Survival takes on a more desperate tone as people turn towards superstition and ritual, seeking answers among the chaos. The flea, once a forgotten nuisance, becomes a focal point of ire and fear. Fleas are demonized, their simple existence now thrust into the spotlight of scapegoating as the populace grapples with an unfathomable reality. Even as the rat population dwindles under the weight of the plague, its role in the greater story remains immutable. History's timeline is interwoven with the life cycle of the flea, a constant reminder of how such small beings can dictate the fate of millions. Shadows loom as episodes of societal collapse unfold. The ripples of their tiny acts lead to tides of change that sweep away entire civilizations. The narrative unfolds, delving deeper into the psychological impact of these events. Individuals contend with the trauma, the very essence of humanity veering towards survival under the weight of abnormality. Fleas, the diminutive tax collectors, extract not just blood, but hope and solidarity, leaving misery in their wake. The chronic hiking of death knells reverberates throughout society, foreshadowing a transformation that will echo down the annals of history. With populations decimated, the fabric of civilization begins to fray, pushing humanity to its limits, leaving behind an indelible imprint that would resonate for generations. And in a curious twist of fate, the chaos created by these tiny terrorists leads to societal reckoning, changes in health practices, strategies for pest control, even shifts in hygiene. Fleas, while a symbol of death and suffering, spark a tide of change that would ultimately push society towards progress and understanding of its own vulnerabilities. In looking closer, we see not just villainy, but a tenacity that pushes life forward, even in the wake of catastrophic loss. In the end, the story of fleas is one of survival, transformation, and an ever-evolving relationship between humanity and the earth it inhabits. The tiniest of creatures emerge as architects of change, illuminating a historical narrative that teaches the world of the precariousness of existence and the persistent struggle against the unseen adversaries that lie in wait. So we step back, taking a moment to reflect on this small yet devastating part of our past. The echoes of those tiny terrorists reverberate still, a reminder to remain vigilant against what may lurk just beyond our sight, hidden within the shadows. Chapter 4. A Cruel Summer. The summer of 1347 begins quietly, yet beneath the warm Sicilian sun, an invisible threat stirs from its slumber. The island, a crossroads of trade, teems with merchants and sailors, their vessels laden with exotic goods, spices from the east, textiles from the Mediterranean, treasures from far-flung lands. But little do these traders know that entwined among the silks and perfumes lies a darker cargo, an unseen passenger that carries death on its back, the flea. As the sun ascends in June, so too does a relentless heat that envelopes the island. The air hangs thick with the scent of salt from the sea and the aroma of ripening citrus groves. But it is not long before this idyllic summer begins to fracture. An ominous whisper spreads through the bustling port of Messina as sailors from a returning ship begin to fall ill. First, it is one, then two, and before long, reports of fever and agony echo through the markets and back alleys. A strange unnerving illness starts to grip the inhabitants, and families are swept into a tide of fear. Witnesses describe the initial symptoms, a sudden onset of fever, accompanied by tremors and confusion, rendering the afflicted helpless. As days stretch on, the gallant fishermen, the proud traders, and the labouring masses begin to show more than just malaise. Dark, swollen lumps known as buboes emerge under their armpits and in their groin, testaments to a body waging war on itself. Horror spreads, an insidious infection that weaves through the population like wildfire. Inside the echoing halls of the town's church, panic manifests in devout prayers and desperate sermons. The townspeople grasp at straws, seeking explanations for this calamity. Is it divine punishment for their sins, or perhaps a curse laid upon them by jealous rivals? As priests gather to provide solace, their pleas for repentance are punctuated by the cries of the afflicted, a horrifying backdrop to the chaos. Among the throngs, a merchant recounts his harrowing ordeal. He remembers the initial warning signs, the tales traded between harbours, whispers of a pestilence lurking just beyond the horizon. But when the illness finally strikes home, it is swift and unforgiving. The bodies of the dead pile up, shrouded in hastily sewn cloth, their faces contorted in terror. Families find themselves torn apart, the healthy fleeing in terror from those stricken. As news of the plague descends upon Sicily, quarantines are established in a desperate attempt to stem the tide. Neighbouring cities seal their gates, their leaders hoping that isolation might buy them time. Yet, for every door that is barred, the disease finds new paths. The very veins of trade, darkened with fear, pulse with the plague's lethal rhythm. As ships come to dock, their holds are filled not only with grain and silk, but with disease. By August, entire families are ravaged. Eyewitnesses describe scenes that feel like a grim theatre, of horror. Streets once echoing with laughter now ring hollow with silence, punctuated only by the cries of the bereaved. The once vibrant marketplaces become graveyards of despair. Shops are shuttered as the gloss of commerce gives way to the spectre of death. The crown of the island bears witness to this unfolding tragedy. As Sicily spirals deeper into chaos, the rich and poor alike succumb to the same horror, their abodes littered with the remnants of lives overturned. Wealth is rendered meaningless when the very essence of life becomes expendable. There is no difference in death, a local scholar observes. It comes for all, irrespective of worldly riches. However, the horror of the Sicilian summer is just the beginning. The ill-fated ships that escape the island's shores carry with them the plague, a hitchhiker eager to travel, an unwanted guest bound for Europe. As the summer wanes and the winds shift, these vessels set sail, their hulls brimming with more than just goods, but with the promise of calamity. In ports across the Mediterranean, the first whispers of contagion rush ashore like a storm. Genoa, once a beacon of trade, finds itself standing on the precipice of obliteration by the time summer fades into autumn. The bustling docks, where seamen once exchanged jovial banter over barreled wine, grow eerily quiet. The signs of the plague are everywhere. A shroud of death descends as victims suffocate in their own blood, their bodies left unclaimed as desperation makes a mockery of duty. The cries of the afflicted haunt the town. Take heed, a merchant warns, eyes wide with fear. Don't meet the fate of Messina. But warnings fall on deaf ears. The iron grip of trade binds the people to their fates, merciless in its hunger. As the ships sail from port to port, they usher in the plague, planting its spores across Europe. As trade routes pulse with activity, the merchants and their cargo engage in a deadly dance, a Fibonacci spiral of death that expands outward, every stop on the map drawing the infected ink closer to the heart of Europe. From Genoa, it spreads north into France and westward into Spain, turning lively towns into silent graveyards. August drips into September, and the peril escalates. The townspeople are no longer just witnesses. They become participants in a collective nightmare. Fear takes root in every heart. Anxious families barricade their doors, believing their homes to be sanctuaries, though the disease shows no mercy to the barricaded. Our tale deepens as social bonds dissolve under pressure. Neighbors turn against each other, fearing contamination. The merchants, once heralded for their trade, become pariahs, as suspicions festoon every corner. Random accusations of witchcraft and betrayal whisper in the night, charges aimed at those least able to defend themselves. Society frays, unraveling amid a panic-stricken populace. By October, the grip of the pandemic seems unshakable. The once bustling streets of Florence witness a grim transformation as cart after cart of the dead begins to roll. Tombs are hastily hewn from the earth, digging deeper than any man thought possible, sterilizing the earth with despair. The sound of shovels hitting ground punctuates the air heavily, each thud a reminder of mortality as the city races against time to bury its own. Through this all, a defining sentiment holds the populace captive. Life hangs by a thread, translating into sheer desperation. It is the end of days, some declare, kneeling in prayer, begging for salvation as their hopes tumble in elegant defeat. Gripped by the weight of darkness, they find solace in community degradation, believing that perhaps the end is indeed drawing near. Yet, amidst the fear, an unbreakable human spirit flickers. The suffering spawns a resilience. Community bonds strengthen in their fragility as people begin to care for the sick, risking their own lives for the sake of others. Their compassion stands in stark contrast to the tides of despair, a glimmer of hope illuminating the profound depths of human empathy. But still, hope flickers dimly against the enormity of what they face. As the summer shifts quietly to fall, life, once teeming with vibrancy, now trembles at the precipice of extinction. Fear and despair swirl together, painting a portrait of humanity standing on the brink, naively unaware that this is merely the prologue to a tragedy unlike any the world has ever witnessed. The cruelty of summer gives way to a longevity of darkness, nature's reminder that humanity, fragile and fallible, is but a heartbeat imperiled, and as the darkness deepens, it is but a prelude. The world is about to plunge into a nightmare from which it may never truly awaken. Chapter 5. The Plague Takes Hold. The sun rises over the bustling streets of Sicily in the spring of 1347, casting a pallid glow over the remnants of a city in vibrant turmoil. Merchants haggle over silks and spices, unaware that a far deadlier commodity is on the brink of arrival. Ships laden with goods from the east dock along the docks of Messina, but they carry an invisible freight, death hidden beneath the guise of commerce. As the last vestiges of winter melt away, the air grows warmer. However, the dread looming in the hearts of the population denotes an unseasonable chill. On board the galleys, sailors have begun to fall ill, their bodies racked with fever, skin breaking out in dark splotches. Husbands and wives gather in anxious clusters at the docks, whispering rumors of an illness unlike any they have ever known. The term pestilence whispers through their lips, a word that feels heavier with each utterance. And then it happens. The fever spreads to the shores of Messina. Those infected within the cities gasp for air, their bodies succumbing to the grip of an illness that convulses their flesh. Panic swiftly replaces curiosity. People scramble to flee, abandoning the comforts of their homes in search of safety, not yet understanding that nowhere can be safe from this merciless contagion. The panic takes root quickly. As the infection creeps through the city, watchmen stride through the streets, bearing wooden stakes, bellowing warnings. The ships must be quarantined. Yet for many, it is too late. The fever has embraced its host, and within days, the population brimming with life is eerily hushed. The once thriving metropolis is now beset by shadows. As the death toll rises, the local nobility gather in hastily convened councils, desperately attempting to retain their grip on power. They implement strict laws, quarantine rings around infected homes, a curfew to reduce public gatherings, but with every decree, the people are driven deeper into despair. The guards of these decrees, once heralds of order, become figures of fear. They grow cruel in their enforcement when hope begins to erode. In a feverish grasp for control, law leads to violence, and neighbors become accusers. Trust dissipates like the morning fog over distant mountains. Beyond Sicily, in the wealthy merchant city of Florence, the airborne spectre begins to settle. Streets, once resounding with laughter, now murmur only of whispers and dread. Within weeks, the once bustling marketplace echoes silently. Merchants cover their goods. Fish rot quietly in their stalls, untouched. Newly erected makeshift pyres fill the streets, and flames flicker against the grey sky, silhouetting figures cloaked in burdened asymmetries, those who must carry the dead to their final resting place. Fear turns a society into a close-knit community of grief, and even the men in white coats, the healers, appear beleaguered, wearing masks instead of compassion. They ply their trade with a dark ingenuity, employing herbal remedies and incantations to stave off the intrusion, but patients still fall, one by one, into the arms of death. The dead are piling up. The moans of the dying merge into a singleton dirge, as life grows thin in the margins of memory. The scent of plague becomes the new perfume electrifying the air, sweet, spicy, suffocating. Church bells toll incessantly, ringing in an era of reckoning. Priests don their vestments and rise to deliver sermons from crumbling pulpits, their faces gaunt and ashen, eyes dulled by despair. The murmurs of God's wrath filter through the pews as devotees question their humanity amid the suffering. In a curious twist, faith offers no sanctuary from despair. Violence becomes a substitute for spirituality in the dark art of blame. Populations begin scapegoating the marginalized, those seen as bearers of incipient doom, further deepening societal fractures. The Jewish community, already historically bereft of allies, now becomes the ultimate target for an unruly populace seeking answers in the face of insurmountable grief. As neighborhoods descend into chaos, vigilante, groups wield torches and pitchforks, their chants echoing like nightmarish symphonies through the streets. Blood becomes synonymous with the virus that gives it life. The world is upside down, and normalcy has become a relic of the past. Is the disease carried by the foreigner? They cry, coupling fear with fury, and violence ensues, spiraling into a frenzy that consumes countless lives. Meanwhile, in Paris, the effects resonate through each cobblestone street. The narrative is similar, yet grotesquely unique in its particularities. It is a city painted in hues of dread. Crumbling tenements burst forth with illness, and the farmers, too frightened to venture into town, abandon their harvests. Agriculture withers as it stands in the fields. Empty spaces once vibrant with bounty become grave markers of untold despair. Amidst the chaos, an ominous silence pervades the court of King Philip VI. No mask can hide the anxiety etched onto his brow. He must make a decision that will alter the fate of his kingdom. As the noblemen gather around the grand table, their worries seep into the fabric of the court, each debate laden with desperation. The spectre of disease broods overhead like a vulture. The ruling elite, frantic to maintain their dominion, seek to impose further controls, issuing tariffs on goods and conducting rigorous searches for the sick. But individual actions betray the greater weight of oppression. Betrayal is rife. The populace begins to craft chilling new memories where the connections of community are severed. Entire families seize the fateful opportunity to abandon their homes and, in desperate bid, begin their treacherous migrations to the countryside, hoping to escape the grasp of the plague. Carts ridden with the desperate are seen bending under the weight of the desperate. It becomes hard to discern whether it is humanity or horror within them. The skeletal figures of the infected writhe helplessly in their homes, conscious of their despondency. The very roof, walls, and despondency. The very roof walls and ground that offered refuge wither beneath an advancing contagion, showcasing the irony of sanctuary as a now frail promise. As spring gives way to summer, the plague has morphed into a ghastly reality, flesh rotting, skin blistering and eyes dimming. The toll is high, veering inexorably toward unprecedented heights, consuming the hearts and hopes of society like an insatiable beast. Yet within the chaos, a certain clarity arises, as the dehumanization of the fragmented world precipitates the need for community and connection. Though diminished, they still clamor for understanding. News travels along the veins of trade routes, the whispers of hope burdened with despair. Images of grim reality, distorted faces streaming in agony, piles of bodies being carted away, funeral processions that seem to stretch endlessly into the void, fill the hearts of those far removed from the epicenter. Knowledge, both infectious and enlightening, transforms into a crude currency, as people pass along tales of survival, resilience, and readiness for reinvention against the harsh visage of fate. With hope stifled by despair, the plague solidifies itself as not merely a disease, but as an incursion on the very spirit of humanity. It reveals the fragility of life, the delicate fabric of society strained to a breaking point, as it crumbles beneath the weight of fear, grief, and loss. Echoes of resilience threaten to drown in the sorrow, yet within this vein of darkness, a hint of something undeniably profound simmers just beneath the surface, a call towards a new identity, albeit forged through the flames of suffering. As Europe lurches into the autumn of 1347, the fog of plague looms wider. Cities gasp in their isolation, but no entity can fracture phenomena of sheer humanity. However chaotic it may be, the winds of history have begun to shift, stirring irrevocably towards an unknown horizon. Would humanity emerge from the ashes of despair transformed, or would it descend into a religious fervor that permits no reprieve for the damned? For now, the anxious breathing of a population remains heightened, embarking on a new journey into a collective darkness yet unseen. This is where we leave a world plunged into anguish, a time of uncertainty that ignites a relentless pursuit of survival within the human heart, even as the plague takes hold. Chapter 6. The death toll rises. In the wake of darkness that shrouds 14th century Europe, a spectre looms, an invisible menace born not from man, but from the tiniest of creatures, fleas. These minuscule parasites are merely agents in a far greater horror, the Black Death. As they hop from rat to human, they unleash a catastrophic wave of death and despair, an event that will etch itself into the annals of human history. At the onset of the pandemic in the late 1340s, the populace is blissfully unaware of the brewing storm. Innocent mindsets prevail. Farmers toil in fields, merchants haggle in bustling markets, and families gather in three-room cottages to share the warmth of their hearth. Yet beneath this scene of pastoral life, a fatal exchange is taking place. The bacteria Yersinia pestis takes root within the bodies of rats, proliferating within the very fabric of society. Each flea is a ticking time bomb, possessing the potential to bring life as it is known to a startling, gruesome halt. As we analyze the demographic impacts, we begin to develop a stark understanding of the plague's harrowing efficiency. Historical documentation, excerpts from chronicles, diaries, and ledgers, offers a chilling narration of a life interrupted, a society fractured. Small towns and sprawling cities, once teeming with laughter and enterprise, become mausoleums, their vibrant populations decimated almost. Overnight, the year 1347 marks a pivotal shift as the disease surges through the shores of Sicily, carried by merchant ships that unwittingly ferried death across the Mediterranean. Within weeks, cities that lay in the plague's path begin to crumble. By implementing statistical analysis, we map the initial outbreaks, starting with Messina, then spreading through southern Italy, reaching Florence in the spring of 1348, an epicenter of affluence and culture. The open squares, once alive with art and ambition, betray an emptiness that seeps into the cobblestones. Through 1348, the death toll rises dramatically. In Florence alone, estimates suggest that within just 2 years, up to 2/3 of the population succumbs to the relentless grip of the plague. Overwhelming wave after wave of mortality inundates the city's infrastructure. Graveyards fill rapidly, churchyards overflow as bodies are piled in makeshift mass graves, often with little regard for the sanctity of the dead. Instead of honoring the deceased, the living shove them into pits, hasty and desperate to keep the air from choking further on decay. Villagers begin to flee to the countryside, believing the fresh air will spell escape from the unrelenting doom. These migrations result in an eerie orchestration of chaos. Rural lands, once serene sanctuaries, now churn in uncertainty. The once comforting sight of a winding road leads not to safety, but into an abyss of contagion. The psychological impact of this pandemic promulgates. Fear becomes a permeating presence, altering the fabric of everyday life, fracturing families apart, ripping communities from their roots. People begin to avoid eye contact, fearing the breath of another could carry infection, and act as innocuous as the exchange of a greeting morphed into a death sentence. Moving into the town of London, we can analyse local records and municipal documents from the period. The mortality rates soar to staggering heights, with some estimates claiming more than half of the population lost to the plague, creating an eerie vacuum. Streets that once echoed with the cries of children and the clatter of horses' hooves on cobblestones are now a dissonance of silence, broken only by the occasional creak of a door or the distant toll of a bell, reminders that, yes, this loss is real, and it stretches across human existence. We delve into the darkest corners of medical understanding at the time, a mixture of superstition and emerging inquiry. Physicians are overwhelmed, their rudimentary knowledge crumbling before the tidal wave of death. They don't understand. They can't fathom how this contagion dances from one victim to another, leaving skeletal remains in its wake. They grapple with intellect and fear, many turning to herbal remedies and phlebotomy rather than confronting the truth, a truth far worse than their own imaginations. Illustrative maps, adorned with crimson splotches, herald the relentless reach of the plague. Each splotch signifies not only death, but chaos. Cities are depicted as shells of themselves, surrounded by rural voids that struggle between survival and annihilation. Here we visualize the ebb and flow of population, once optimistic towns retreating into shadows, their records and identities forever altered. By the end of 1349, we witness yet another shift, a second wave that corresponds with the seasonal cycle, proving that death can be cyclical as well. As spring dawns, the chill in the air carries the ghost of a previous winter, and with it comes renewed devastation. It is here we see a pattern emerging, an unsettling normalization of mortality that washes over the populace. Survival becomes a daily exercise steeped in fear, denial, and occasional fleeting moments of hope that intertwine harshly with reality, a reality that might best be described as living yet feeling dead. Graphical representations reveal startling trends. As the death toll mounts, societal elements begin to falter. Fields lie untended, harvests rot upon the vine, and towns that once echoed with revelry decay into whispers. Labourers vanish, and with them, The very heartbeat of agricultural existence dwindles. This is no mere absence, it is a collapse, an eerie echo of once vibrant communities taking their final breath. Through these harrowing statistics, we must ask ourselves, what does a society look like when it has lost so much? Through the lens of history, we portray the unraveling of relationships. Families fracture, commerce declines, and spirituality is questioned in the wake of such senseless mortality. Survivors clutch to one another in desperation. They gather in taverns, whispering rumors and tales of hope or horror, depending on the tumbling luck of the draw. To live in this environment is to inhabit a realm of perpetual grief, where each dawn bears witness to the passing of neighbors, friends, loved ones. Each person carries the burden of loss infused with guilt for having made it through unscathed. By 1350, the death toll in Europe exceeds the wildest estimations. Nearly 25 million lives extinguished, half of the continent's populace falling prey to the plague's wicked grasp. Each brutal statistic echoes in the chambers of memory, painting not just a horrifying picture of the pandemic, but a reflection of humanity facing its greatest challenge. Class struggles, once dormant beneath the weight of tradition, rise to the surface as those who remain grapple with the new reality of life, without the structures that once upheld them. As we delve deeper into the aftermath, landscapes once touched by culture and kinship fall into desolation. Towns like Paris and Venice shift in their essence, collapsing under the weight of despair. The once celebrated artisans and tradesmen face abandonment. Each brushstroke and handcrafted piece becomes a relic of a lost world, suspended in the hollowness of their creator's absence. We examine the records of the dead, exploring names and faces that disintegrate into the void of time, yet whose stories echo through the ages in the faces of the survivors. The seeds of a new world will eventually be sown in this fertile ground of chaos, but the realities of the death toll remind us of the cost of survival when the very fabric of existence unravels before our eyes. In the long shadows of 1351, as the wave of death begins to wane, we find somber reflections in the hearts of those who remain. There is no glory in survival, just an understanding that life, frail as it is, unearths the solid truths, the bonds of kinship, the reverie of community, and the legacy of loss. Through this lens, we engage with the haunting reality of a world forever altered, of souls marked by grief, yet poised beneath the weight of history, yearning for redemption amid the ruins left behind. And so, as the chapter thickens and the clock ticks on, we recognize that the death toll continues to rise, inscribing its numbers into the narrative of humanity. This is a moment set in darkness, yet within the shadows we find echoes of resilience, a whisper, perhaps, of a future emerging from the ashes. Chapter 7. Fear and Blame. Across a continent gripped by the shadows of death, the air heavy with despair thickens with fear and confusion. It is the year 1348, and the Black Death ravages through towns and cities, claiming lives with a cruel, unrelenting efficiency. As the sickened cry for help echoes against the stone walls, a different cry rises just above the haunting silence, a cry of accusation, blame, and an age-old need to find a scapegoat. In the decaying streets of Florence, the stench of disease mingles with that of desperation. Families barricade their doors, clutching the praying beads tightly in their palms, as though faith could ward off the ever-looming presence of death. The wealthy flee to their countryside estates, leaving behind the silent cries of their neighbors. No one is spared. It knows no social class, no honor, no mercy. But amidst this chaos, a singular question emerges. Why is this plague stalking the people? They seek answers, as the toll of death rises. Devastated communities clutch for meaning in the meaningless devastation. Could the suffering be a punishment? Perhaps this is an act of God, a divine retribution against sin. Such thoughts spiral out of control, giving way to a landscape of paranoia, that festers like an untreated wound. As the panic mounts, the spotlight of blame shifts toward those already shunned by society. In nearly every European city, marginalized groups, the Jews, lepers, the outcasts, find themselves swept into the maelstrom of accusation. Rumors spread like wildfire, igniting the imaginations of those desperate for explanation, for an outlet for their horror. People whisper, huddled together in their fear of conspiracy and malevolence. The plague must be the work of the damned, they reason. In scattered villages across Germany and France, Jews are accused of poisoning wells, willfully spreading the contagion. Though historians today agree this was utterly unfounded, the masses are not swayed by reason. They cling to the narrative like a lifeline, searching for something or someone to hold accountable. In their minds, the Jews have become the dark puppeteers orchestrating this tragedy, pulling the strings from the shadows, their sinister laughter echoing in the corners of a desperate society. The images that emerge from this period are stark, drenched in the blood of innocent lives. Armed mobs, fueled by fear and the ephemeral thrill of vengeance, drag Jewish families from their homes. They burn synagogues, send smoke billowing into the skies, an act of betrayal to the very foundations of a society built on shared humanity. In the minds of many, it is more than just acting against a perceived enemy. It is a purification, an attempt to cleanse the taint of disease that has so viciously taken hold. In the midst of this chaos, paranoia grips the minds of rulers and peasants alike. The church, embroiled in its own power struggles, lends its weight to the accusations. Preaching sermons filled with fiery rhetoric, some priests instigate violence, driving an already trembling populace toward brutality. They speak of sinfulness, declaring that the very presence of Jews is a catalyst for divine wrath. Meanwhile, lepers, bearing the double burden of disease and social stigma, become entwined in this web of blame. They too are hunted. In the eyes of the masses, they embody a visible manifestation of suffering, a living confession of society's sins. Their disease, long seen as a curse or punishment, transforms them into convenient pariahs. With every cry of horror, with every death toll calculated, lepers find themselves increasingly cornered. The persecution culminates in horrific acts, entire communities razed under the guise of righteous anger. In Strasbourg, a massacre engulfs the city. A torrent of blood washes over the streets, a vicious cycle unleashed upon those labelled as the others. Men, women, and children perish not, merely from sickness, but from swords, flames, and hatred wielded by their previously indifferent neighbours. This evolution of fear to fury is rapid and shocking. Fear surfaces first as lethargy, then transforms into desperate rage. Societal structures begin to crack, fissures appearing in the old orders, as fear commandeers every interaction, every glance. When a local doctor stumbles upon a fragment of the truth, a case without rhyme or reason, he is silenced. The darker whispers gather around him, subliminally demanding conformity to the collective animosity cloaked as survival. As bloodlines spill and reason fails, dissent forms peculiar manifestations. Amidst all that despair and rage, the scattered remnants of hope clamour for a voice. A few brave souls echo reason, imploring their kin not to succumb to this dark tide. They plead for compassion amidst a sea of blood, but their pleas are lost in the sea of screams. Hope becomes secondary to survival, forgotten beneath a chaotic wave of vindication that sweeps optimists away. And what of the rulers? The powerful, seated in their grand halls, make cold calculations. A united populace lends strength. A blame-targeted crowd offers them a sense of control. They foster the sentiments of rage against the Jews and lepers, ensuring that such hatred redirects the sting of retribution away from their failings. The roles of oppression and persecution become politicized tools, the very foundation upon which power is maintained. To the rulers, chaos amongst the masses is preferable to questions of governance. With every innocent life claimed in the streets, they maneuver through the political maelstrom, drawing attention away from issues that plague their rule. The contagion is merely a diversion, and the hunt for blame a means to preserve their uncertain grasp on dominion. As the stark months bleed into years, the sickly pallor of death endures. The fervour of violence against Jews and lepers transcends borders, infecting even the more prosperous cities like Venice and Paris. The landscape of terror expands, swelling with the injustices committed beneath the guise of survival. Local leaders whisper to one another, carefully gauging the winds of public opinion. They know a ruler's popularity hinges precariously on what or whom the people can collectively loathe. Through it all, humanity hangs in the balance, teetering on the precipice of reason and madness, a synonym for history's cyclical tragedy, where the hunted become the hunters. Yet, even in this darkest moment, the spectre of consequence looms large. The repercussions of violence unfurl both morally and culturally. As the centuries roll forth, the narratives constructed in blood take root, deep and insidious, predicting patterns of prejudice. The path of destruction will linger long after these terrifying hours fade, remnants of injustice embedding themselves deeply within societal memory. The perilous descent into fear-driven violence leaves a stain forever hovering over the European consciousness, a lingering fear that continues to animate the stories and legends whispered in hushed tones. The fear and the blame will linger, lingering long after the plague itself has departed, woven into the very fabric of society. A dark history haunting not just the past, but echoing through time. And so, as the darkness of these acts begins to recede, it becomes evident that the true plague infecting humanity is not just the physical toll of disease, but the insatiable thirst for a scapegoat, a search for culprits amid the chaos of an unexplainable catastrophe. And in this darkness, lessons remain unlearned, echoing through generations, as the spectre of fear and a misguided need for blame threaten to rise again. In this moment of reckoning, we are left to wonder, in the throes of personal suffering, how far might humanity fall, and what remnants of compassion and empathy will be left to guide us through the ravages of fear. Chapter 8: Survival and Resilience. The air crackles with tension as the streets awaken to a somber truth. The year is 1348, and the night's chill lingers in the dawn light, heavy with anticipation. Plague, a term once whispered in dark corners, is now a looming spectre haunting every village and city across Europe. The blackened skin of the afflicted is an indelible mark on the fabric of society. Yet amid this despair, life finds a way to pulse through the cracks. Communities are torn apart, but in the midst of this chaos, stories of survival and resilience rise to the surface, echoing the age-old truth. Humanity possesses a remarkable ability to adapt, even under the darkest clouds. In the thriving port of Genoa, merchants once relished the bounty of the Mediterranean trade, their ships filled with spices and silks. Now, fear tangles with commerce as ships return with not just goods, but something far more sinister: disease. Yet, even here, a spirit of defiance brews. As the merchant class bears the brunt of economic collapse, they realize that their very survival hinges on collective action. They band together, sharing resources and knowledge, creating networks of support that spread across the region. It's a fragile alliance born from shared adversity, but it sparks flickers of hope amid the degradation. In the shadow of their crumbling city walls, families huddle in their homes, facing the uncertainty that gnaws at their resolve. Mothers and fathers, once providers, now grapple with the weight of impending doom and the struggle to protect their children. They turn inward, nurturing deep bonds with one another in a dance of survival. Cooking becomes an act of defiance, flavors mingling as families concoct soups from wilted vegetables and grains salvaged from rotting stores. These modest feasts, a simple gathering around the table, morph into sacred rituals, reaffirming life in a time when death appears ever present. As whispers of plague drift from one village to another, the spirit of resilience takes root. It grows strongest in the heart of the countryside, where peasants, skilled in the practices of the earth, begin fortifying their small holdings. Bartering becomes a means of survival, transforming the landscape of trade. A merchant may arrive, cloaked in a shroud of suspicion, but instead of retreating in fear, communities embrace their old ways, trading vegetables for textiles, livestock for grains. This unyielding determination births an underground economy, a lifeline that ties communities together, each thread woven with the instinct to survive. As days turn into weeks and weeks into months, the wave of devastation sweeps on, but in this tide, bravery finds its footing. The clergy, once seen as the infallible face of authority, are met with increasing scrutiny. With the death toll rising, villagers grow disturbed at their leaders' inability to offer solace. A remarkable shift unfolds. A deepening distrust pushes individuals to seek their own answers and forge their paths. No longer merely subordinate to divine will, the people claim agency over their lives, searching for signs of endurance within themselves. In the heart of Paris, the universities serve as beacons of knowledge amid a sea of ignorance, fighting against the tide of despair. Students gather in cloisters, their discourse swirling like the smoke of burning candles. Scholars refine their mental faculties, debating not just philosophy, but practical solutions to combat the plague. They study nature, human behavior, and the very fabric of society, shaping their ideas into a flurry of ink upon parchment. Though cloaked in fear, they begin envisioning a future that leans heavily on resilience. They establish makeshift hospitals, dedicated volunteers serving the afflicted, their compassion rendering the facade of helplessness obsolete. Each human life saved becomes a testament to defiance against destiny. The sick, cradled in makeshift beds, receive care from those who refuse to abandon their posts, nurses and our humble knowledge keepers. Their duty stretches beyond mere survival. It morphs into a fight for the human spirit itself. The courage shown in these innovations births a powerful motto amongst those who dare to hope. Let life go on, come what may. Yet, every flicker of light is accompanied by shadows creeping closer by the day. As the authorities adopt increasingly draconian measures in a frenzied attempt to restore order, the desperation among the population grows. Families are separated in the name of health. Loved ones are whisked away into quarantine with no promise of return. The tension takes a toll on the psyche of communities. Fears simmer beneath the surface, stoking old prejudices and igniting mob mentality. In places like Florence, townsfolk turn on one another, scapegoating the marginalized, blaming the Jews, the outsiders, the sick. In their desperate grasp for control, they unleash violence and chaos, tearing at the very seams of humanity. Amidst this turmoil, the unwanted echo of survival continues to resonate. Within the village of Siena, a group of artisans emerges as unyielding pillars of resilience. Instead of surrendering to fate, they choose to innovate, adapting their crafts to meet new demands. Tattered garments are transformed into patchwork creations, the remnants of luxury met by the call of necessity. They flourish, captivating the hearts of their neighbors with their resourcefulness. The joy of creation replaces the shadow of despair as communities begin to grapple not just with survival, but transformation. As autumn fades into winter, something unfurls, an awareness that life must persist, regardless of hardship. Gatherings take on new dimensions, shifting from the somber tones of mourning towards a celebration of the survivors. Festivals, though subdued, arise from the ashes. The sound of laughter weaves through the villages as music and dance echo like reminders of life amidst the quiet grief. Resilience manifests not only in survival, but in the unwavering determination to embrace joy where it can be found. In this moment, the stories of the unsung heroes of the plague become vivid, unsung not because they forgot to sing, but because their songs harmonized with the relentless march of survival. Their faces become symbols of a collective struggle, and narratives based on humanity's capacity for kindness emerge as urgent legacies that future generations will come to cherish. As quarantine and uncertainty linger, whispers of progress, a reimagined world in the aftermath, begin to take shape. The gathering of farmers, traders, and scholars at the local markets forges a new social fabric. They share tales of their losses, but also recount their victories, creating a bond that is more than just transactional. It marks the birth of a new identity, rooted in their shared resilience as survivors of a relentless storm. Restoration follows. The landscapes scarred by the fallout of the pestilence begin to bloom anew. Nature, often seen as indifferent, seems to respond to the efforts of the survivors. Fields ripen in that spring light, a reminder that rebirth follows death. By nurturing relationships and embracing collective innovation, communities redefine their futures, setting the foundations for a society built on endurance and empathy. As the sun rises on new horizons, the shadows of the past linger like ghosts, lessons etched into the very bones of these villages. But as the refrain of resilience echoes forward, a deep understanding settles in. The human spirit, when forged in adversity, can lead to profound change. Together, they survive, they thrive, shaping a legacy that will echo through time, reminding generations yet to come of their capacity to endure and emerge on the other side of darkness. Chapter 9. Cultural Shifts Post-Plague. The air hangs heavy with uncertainty and dread as the dark aftermath of the Black Plague cloaks Europe. We find ourselves in the mid-14th century, where the echoes of death resonate through every cobbled street and narrow alley. The once vibrant tapestry of life unravels into disarray, each thread a testament to a community ravaged by despair. As the survivors emerge from the shadows of mortality, they are transformed, carrying within them the scars of loss and the weight of grief. The religious fervour they once held so dear begins to fray at the edges, unravelling into a morbid fascination with death and the afterlife. This cultural descent into darkness reaches its zenith and finds stark expression in art and philosophy, where the spectre of the plague imposes a new perspective on existence. In the aftermath of those grim years, the conceptual framework of life shifts. Artists, once inspired by the beauty of the divine and the natural world, now channel their energy into the macabre, depicting the ephemeral nature of humanity. We enter a world where the grotesque becomes a canvas for explorations of mortality. The imagery shifts. Paintings and sculptures become saturated with death. Fleshy cadavers, skeletal figures, and mournful saints dominate the artistic landscape. The preeminent theme of the dance of death, or danse macabre, emerges from the depths of this cultural sea, encapsulating the inevitability of death, a reminder that regardless of status, wealth, or virtue, all must eventually confront their mortal fate. Art becomes a reflection of existential dread, each piece heaving with a weight that demands acknowledgement. Artists contribute to a collective consciousness, where death is no longer an abstract concept, but a tangible reality. As we wander through the dimly lit galleries of this new artistic age, we find ourselves confronted with works that visually narrate the struggles wrought by this devastating plague. The imagery is shocking, raw. Vibrant colours are replaced by pallid hues. The once celebratory scenes of life turn into sombre reflections on decay. There, in the midst of writhing figures, death shrieks a powerful message. Inevitably, the viewer is transformed, forced to confront their own relationship with the spectre lurking just beyond the veil of existence. Philosophy, too, makes a seismic shift, torn between the light of humanism that flickers weakly against the dark and the looming shadow that claims so many souls. Thinkers grapple with fear. Fear of mortality, fear of a world without the familiar embrace of the divine. and fear of the apparent futility of life itself. They ask the hard questions that plague the human soul. What does it mean to exist in a world where suffering is endemic? What is the purpose of life when it appears to lead to inevitable doom? Amidst this turmoil, a newer form of existentialism begins to sound, one that embraces the fragility of life rather than shunning it. Theologians, now deeply questioning their previous convictions, begin to wrestle with concepts of divine justice amidst the chaos. They ponder why a benevolent God would subject humanity to such relentless torment and suffering. This philosophical questioning leads to a more abstract interpretation of faith, the emergence of mysticism as a way to connect the tangible and the celestial. In literature, echoes of this existential dread fill the pages of many works. Authors write not of chivalry or romance, but of disillusionment and despair. The literature of the day reflects a society desperately searching for meaning in the throes of chaos. Writers like Giovanni Boccaccio, through his seminal work The Decameron, capture the human condition through tales spun with dark humor and biting irony. His characters navigate through plague-stricken landscapes, each story a mirror to the anxieties coursing through a collective soul scarred by trauma. As the visceral reality of the plague sinks deeper into the cultural consciousness, allegories on the human condition seep into every narrative. Mortality becomes the great equalizer, stripping away pretense and facade. The lower classes and elite alike find their paths converging in death's embrace. Art, literature, and philosophy intertwine, creating a rich tapestry that speaks to the human experience, a reflection of the shattered world, modified by the plague's relentless grip. The cultural landscape shifts dramatically, composing a story that leads individuals through grief, loss, and ultimately a redefined understanding of existence. The theatre of the morose emerges, capturing the imaginations of those still grappling for meaning in a world once defined by certainty. The tragedies performed on stage echo the desperation felt in the streets, where laughter feels like a long-forgotten memory. People gather not only to escape, but also to confront their darkest fears collectively. The theatre, once a realm of mirth, transforms into a forum for public mourning, a space of catharsis as society absorbs its collective trauma through art. And yet, amidst the pallor of despair, life finds a way to endure. The human spirit, though battered, stirs with resilience. As the harsh realities of existence continue to assert themselves, a sliver of hope flickers in the shadows. The Renaissance looms on the horizon, promising a reawakening and a return to the celebration of human potential and beauty. Yet that rebirth is still tempered by the lessons imparted by the plague. The delicate balance between life's fleeting joy and its ever-present suffering comes to the fore. Those artists who experienced the devastation firsthand immortalize the complexities of humanity in their work. Each stroke of the paintbrush, every carefully carved figure, resonates with the understanding that beauty and horror exist in symbiosis. Each cannot exist without the other. The duality of life becomes the primary lens through which existence is viewed, and from these depths of darkness, a new form of artistic expression emerges. Rebirth blossoms within the shadows of death, a counterpoint to the overwhelming grief. Amidst the horrors of the past, we witness the seeds of change being planted. The collective psyche of Europe has been infected, not only with despair, but with a newfound appreciation for life's transient essence. This cultural metamorphosis becomes the cradle of new possibilities, where the darkest corners of humanity's psyche are explored, understood, and ultimately transformed into art. As the survivors navigate through these shifting landscapes of belief and expression, there lies a palpable tension between the past and the future. The Black Plague, while a catastrophic force of nature, inadvertently molds a path toward a profound understanding of life, death, and the intricate dance between the two. And so, as we stand at the precipice of a new cultural era, we recognize that each brushstroke and each written word will continue to echo the sentiments of a generation changed forever by a pestilence that sought to consume, but, paradoxically, rejuvenated the human spirit. In our exploration of the artistic and philosophical landscapes post-plague, we glean lessons forged in suffering, reminders of mortality that resonate through time. The shadows may lengthen, yet beyond them lie the hints of dawn, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the depth of our creative potential. The dark history of the plague thus becomes a rich tapestry of transformation and rebirth, inviting us to explore the complexities of our existence through the lens of mortality. Chapter 10. Lessons of the Past. In the quiet echoes of history, the aftermath of catastrophe often serves as a solemn teacher. The Black Death, a harbinger of despair that struck in the 14th century, did not merely take lives. It reshaped the very foundations of public health, consciousness, and urban planning. As the miasmas of the past linger in the shadows of our existence, we pause to reflect on how this darkest chapter of human history has reverberated through time and into our present reality. It begins in the decimated streets of medieval Europe, where the stench of death mingles with the cries of the living. In the wake of such devastation, the surviving populace learns hard lessons steeped in fear, yet rich in potential for growth. The pestilence has stirred something deep within the fabric of society, igniting a quest for betterment amid chaos. In the immediate aftermath, among the debris of a shattered civilization, confusion reigns. People wander the streets, grappling with the palpable enormity of loss. As they navigate through shadows, the sparks of change flicker to life, illuminating a darkened path toward a future rooted in resilience. Broadly, the understanding of health shifts dramatically during this period. Before the plague, the prevailing belief holds that disease is a punishment, a divine retribution for the sins of humanity. Yet as the death toll escalates, a growing realization dawns. There must be a more tangible scientific explanation for the spread of this unimaginable horror. The search for truth drives the innovation of ideas. The connections between filth, health, and mortality become clearer. People begin to connect cleanliness with survival, transforming urban living from a breeding ground for disease to a battleground for health. In crowded cities like Florence, which sat close to the epicenter of the plague's wrath, the evidence of suffering echoes in every corner. Yet beyond the anguish, leaders grasp the necessity of change. They initiate reforms that will ripple through the centuries. With disease's heavy hand pressing down, urban planners start to consider sanitation, not merely as an afterthought, but as the lifeblood of city infrastructure. Shady alleyways, previously mere conduits for commerce, become the focus of intervention. Narrow streets are widened to allow fresh air to flow and sunlight to enter, while waste management becomes paramount. For the first time, the interconnectedness of human habit and public health seeps into the conscience of society. Experts dissect the significance of the Black Death through a modern lens, revealing haunting parallels with our own era. Public health advocates analyze how the pain endured reshaped collective thoughts surrounding hygiene. The establishment of the first public health boards emerges in response to the desperate need for coordinated strategies to combat disease. There's a collective shift toward more systematic approaches to health and sanitation, an acknowledgement that to safeguard the present, society must learn from the past. The notion of a filth-ridden environment as a precursor to ill health takes hold among scholars, birthing fundamental ideas that form the backbone of public health practices to this day. Yet it is not merely the physical restructuring of cities that changes. The psychological landscape transforms too. This period of turmoil breeds a renewed sense of civic responsibility. Citizens unite in their plight, fostering a community bond that had previously languished in medieval society's hierarchy. Spending time in humanitarian efforts becomes the norm. People begin to realize that survival is collective rather than individual. Through their shared hardship, they form an unspoken pact to safeguard their city, their health, and each other against the spectre of death that looms, always at the threshold. As the years pass, a pivotal moment emerges, the advent of medical practices, grounded in observation rather than dogma, enters the fray. Physicians begin to document their observations, meticulously recording cases and symptoms. They initiate a slow but steady evolution of medical knowledge, drawing vital connections between environment, sanitation, and disease. The foundation for epidemiology, a word that will later ring true in the face of countless infectious diseases, is laid upon the ashes of the Black Plague's death toll. Forums for discussion emerge, where intellectuals debate the profound impacts of the plague. Scholars from different walks of life gather to dissect data and develop theories. Collaborative efforts surge, breaking down barriers as the urgency of the situation drives a focal point: the establishment of inoculation techniques and quarantine practices. These early experiments with medical isolation mark a turning point, shaping the framework for disease prevention in the future. Centuries later, we mirror these foundational changes through modern lenses, confronting our own infectious diseases such as COVID-19. The lessons learned from the Black Death wink at us, whispering echoes of wisdom as we look at our own public health battles. As fear grips the world once more, public spaces are re-evaluated. Esteemed voices in epidemiology advocate for contact tracing, shelter-in-place orders, and the unveiling of scientific transparency. The historical compass directs us as we ponder the rationale behind global health policies. There lies a past that lives on within our present, a reminder of humanity's ongoing struggle against the pervasive threat of contagion. Nevertheless, the narratives we construct now are laced with new fears. As experts analyze these parallels, they reveal undercurrents of tension. How much have we truly learned? And as we gaze into the face of a pandemic, does history repeat itself or does it evolve? The public's reactions, polarized by misinformation, resound across the ages. Just as people in the 14th century turned to superstition amidst chaos, today we find ourselves divided between science and skepticism. Our collective consciousness weaves a tapestry, much like those before us, caught between fear and understanding. Yet, in the heart of strife lies resilience. Each advance born from tragedy, new sanitation practices, public health policies, community solidarity, hints at an illuminating truth. The echoes of the past reverberate into our modern cities, where urban planners reimagine public spaces with safety and health as central pillars. Parks spring up where narrow streets once led to despair. Airflow, sunlight, and greenery become essentials in the urban living lexicon. The blueprints of hope unfold, revealing parks and open spaces where citizens can breathe free from the remnants of the epidemic. Civic leaders now understand the importance of integrating public health into urban design. The streets are crafted not only for efficiency, but for well-being. The lessons that history imparted emerge with profound clarity. These are not merely logistics, they are lifelines. Cities transformed by the wisdom of yesteryear forge our path forward. In the slow shadows of twilight, as the sun dips below the horizon, we are left contemplating the duality of human existence. The Black Death taught us the fragility of life, but also illuminated our capacity for change. With every disease combated, every system reformed, we echo the resilience of those who walked before us. For as long as we remember, the spectral fleas that once danced upon infected rats serve as a reminder, a call to action in the face of uncertainty, a beacon urging us to learn, adapt, and ultimately endure. In examining the lessons of the past, we grasp a vital truth. We are stewards of history. Each decision we make reverberates. The streets we walk upon, the practices we adopt, each step holds the potential to shift the narrative. In the war against infectious disease, our awareness becomes our greatest weapon. Through the lens of the Black Plague, we find a historical compass guiding us into the present and beyond. The lessons linger, indelibly inked onto the parchment of time, a testament to our struggle with mortality, a declaration of our resolve to rise anew. Together, we battle shadows, guarded by the wisdom woven through the ages. The only certainty is that the past is still writing its story upon the pages of our lives, echoes through time. As we emerge from the shadowy corridors of history, the echoes of a world ravaged by the plague still reverberate in the silence around us. We've traced the delicate threads of how the smallest of creatures, the ubiquitous flea, spawned an unimaginable catastrophe, altering the fabric of society. This tale reminds us that history is not a distant relic, but a living testament, one that has shaped our present and continues to cast a long shadow well into the future. The legacy of the Black Plague is suffused with the ghosts of those who fell victim to its wrath, their cries intertwined with the fabric of our collective memory. It speaks to the vulnerability that resides within our humanity, the stark reality that unseen forces, whether they be pathogens or the whims of fate, can unravel our lives in an instant. In the wake of the pandemic that swept across continents, we bear witness to a far greater understanding of fragility, not just of bodies, but of communities, societies, and the very structures of our civilization. Each tremor of the past reverberates in our current world, infusing our responses to crises with the weight of historical lessons, the scars of loss serving as a warning. In this haunting dance with mortality, we uncover the resilience forged through suffering, lives cut short, yet from their ashes rise new understandings and responses, an evolution of empathy and science. What remains are both the wisps of fear and the sparks of hope, coiling together in a maze of human experience. As we dim the lights on this haunting narrative, one must ponder, what will this history teach us in the face of our current health battles? Will we heed its warnings or succumb to the deadly allure of forgetting? The echoes of the past linger on, whispering secrets of survival and fragility, a reminder that we walk a tightrope stretched across time, balancing on the fissures of vulnerability and resilience. If this journey through dark history has left its mark on you, leave a like. Let it be a testament that you have survived this grim odyssey. Drop a comment below. I want to know which part of this story haunts you most. Was it the desperation, the devastation, or the faint glimmers of hope found amidst despair? And as we close this chapter, prepare yourself. For in the murky depths of history, darkness stirs anew. Join us next time as we peel back the layers of another chilling tale, where shadows lurk and forgotten truths threaten to surface, revealing the sinister grip of plague in a world much like our own today. Until then, tread carefully through the echoes of time,